Is mold making you sick? Could it be the cause of your mystery autoimmune disease? Well, it was for me, and some experts estimate that 20% of the population could be struggling with mold toxicity and not even realize it. I recently figured out that mold was the cause of my chronic illness that I've been struggling with for the past 4 years, and I'm currently on an extensive treatment plan to get better. If you're new here, I have a degree in science and I enjoy doing research on topics and reporting them.
Planet Near Podcast. This is the journey of setting yourself free.
How to test your home for mold. So, like I keep saying, you can't always see mold. In fact, the 3 houses that made me sick, I could not see mold at all, except for those tiny spots I finally saw in the ensuite. So, according to Dr. Shoemaker, there is no one type of house that is more likely to be moldy than others. So, while older houses have more time to be water damaged, some modern houses aren't really built that well. So, the house that I lived in, the last one, was a new renovation, but it had a flat roof, so poor drainage. So, like I said earlier, if there is some kind of leak or flooding, it has to be dried professionally with dehumidifiers within 24 to 48 hours or mold will grow. So, the quickest and easiest way is to get an ERMI test. So, ERMI stands for Environmental Relative Moldiness Index. Basically, what this test does, it's like a cloth and you wipe it over a dusty sample, surface sample. This could be the top of like a ceiling fan, and then you send it to a lab. And this test measures the concentration of harmful mold species in the dust sample. So it's relatively cheap and quick. I think the turnaround time is about a week. So this is a really good option for testing potential rental homes, or even if you want to buy a home, you need to know quickly, is there mold in this house? It's a good way to go about it. However, it doesn't tell you much more than if mold is present. Moisture meter. So moisture meters can be important because they can show you evidence of water damage, which is obviously linked to mold. However, you have to get the right moisture meter. Some are shit and it doesn't give you the whole story either. So I spoke to Jess from Moldwise. She's a really, really great mold inspector in Australia who has suffered from SEERS, so she gets how serious you have to take it. She's also agreed to be on my podcast in a future episode. But she sent me a recommendation for one that she has heard is like a really decent one you can get from Bunnings for $50. But yeah, she says she hasn't tested it herself. Okay, mold inspector. So obviously, if you think you have mold, you can get a mold inspector, but be warned, if you want to get your house tested for mold, you have to be very careful in Australia. There are no guidelines, and some companies work closely with insurance companies and landlords, and they want to say that nothing is wrong because obviously remediation can mean tearing down walls, full renovation. It can cost thousands of dollars, if not hundreds. So some companies do have their best intentions, but if they haven't had SEERS and mold toxicity, they honestly don't know how serious they need to take it. So what is fine for a normal person is not fine for a person with SEERS. So a good inspector will inspect the entire house. They will walk around the perimeter, suss out drainage, ask about the house history, do thermal testing, as well as surface samples and air samples. They will take air samples both inside of the house and outside so they can compare them. And they will advise you to keep all windows and doors closed for 48 hours prior to testing. If they don't do these things, that's an indication they're probably not the best mold inspector. The best thing you can do is probably get a building biologist most of the time. Doesn't have to be, but a lot of them are pretty good. Expect to pay anywhere from $1,000 up, depending on the size of your house. I know it's a lot of money, but unfortunately, if you have SEERS, you don't really have a choice. I know someone who paid a mold inspector $26,000 to remediate her house, only to still be getting symptoms. So she hired a building biologist, and almost every room in her house came back a red zone. So, it's not worth cutting corners. For context, when I was looking at getting my parents' house tested, an inspector told me that insurance should send a hygienist for free if someone in the house has the gene. And so we called our insurance and they actually honoured that. So they came and did the test. It was like a 20-year-old guy. He had no idea what he was doing, to be perfectly honest with you. He didn't tell us to lock up the house beforehand. He was asking me, like, where do you think I should do the surface sample? I'm like, bro, you're the expert. Like, anyway, the report came back and it said that nothing was wrong. Everything was fine. But I was having symptoms, so I knew. So I sent the report to Jess from Moldwise. I paid Jess $150 to look over the report, which is the service that she offers. And yeah, she said there's a lot of red flags here, including like did test positive for 2 types of mold. So then I contacted MJ from MJ Building Biology. The link to all these people is on my blog, which is in the description. And she looked over my parents' house and she found several problems. So, including one red zone, which was the room that was next to the bedroom that I was sleeping in, like when I tried to sleep in the house for a short period of time. And you can't see mold in any of these walls in this room. So, it's really difficult to get the right people. Like my advice, honestly, is to just don't cut corners. Expect to pay a bit of money up front, but it's better to do that at the start than have to just fuck around and just have to pay even more later. Okay, renting. If you are renting, report the mold to the real estate. So I don't know the laws for all the different states in Australia, but according to VCAT, which is the Victorian Tribunal which resolves disputes between landlords and renters, in Victoria, they have to do something about it within 2 business days, or you can basically sue them for everything, including medical costs, replacing furniture, 25% of your rent from the day that you reported, etc. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't take this seriously, and landlords are hesitant to because remediation can be very expensive. So, if mold is detected, in Victoria, you are allowed to break the lease without any penalties. E.g., they can't keep your bond, which I stated earlier. But the hard thing with renting is that because there's no guidelines, they kind of don't have to take it as seriously as they need to yet. Hopefully, in 10, 20 years, this changes. It's really, really hard. But, if there is, like, really obvious mold and they're not taking it serious, you can sue them, but, it's really hard. I'm lucky that I was in a position where I have a good relationship with my parents and they let me live in a tent in their backyard, but if you can do something like that, it sounds shit, but being healthy is worth it. Okay, remediation. What does the remediation process looks like? So, remediation must be done by a professional. So, remediation can involve replacing plaster, scratching mold out of the wooden frames of the house, vacuuming mold from areas with professional equipment. So, this can be very expensive. A lot of this has to be done by professionals. So, other areas that need to be remediated often includes air conditioners. So, air conditioners are a breeding ground for mold and they have to be professionally cleaned by a specialist twice a year if you have SEERs. Furniture. If you have porous furniture, I think couches, you have to throw it away. Unfortunately, these are ones that can't be cleaned if they're contaminated. If they've been in a moldy house and you want to move to a new house, it's just not worth taking it. I know this is really hard to hear, but so many people talk about contaminating their new home by bringing furniture from the old home. So it depends on like how sensitive you are as well. Wood is also considered bad unless it's sealed, and mattresses are another one that have to go. So I sold a lot of my furniture just to be sure, and I threw away my mattress. And yeah, I later discovered that even my makeup brushes were moldy. So the mold spores do travel and, contaminate. Clothing. So if you can visibly see mold on your clothes, you have to throw it. Otherwise, you should wash everything 4 times with different additives each time, according to the shoemaker protocol. So, look, the best place, if you want more information on all of this, I really recommend Dr. Shoemaker's website, survivingmold.com. Also put that on my blog, but that's the best place to go for all this information. So, I had to wash every single item of clothing that I owned, which cost me like $300 at the laundromat. And I ruined one of my favorite jumpers. And to be honest with you, that was the first time this whole thing really broke me. Like, that was the first time I was really, really upset about everything. Like, I was pretty positive about everything until then because I was happy that I knew what was making me sick. But yeah, I don't know, like, yeah, that's when I started to get angry.